Okay, I'm going to run you through how to put together a folio page or two that helps not just to demonstrate that you've done a survey or an interview, but actually helps you to better meet the performance standards and criteria in the folio. What you want to do is create a page or two that tells the story of the survey or the interview. So I tend to ask that you split it up something along the lines of the following. So this is a document that you'll find on the P drive, and it's about how to create a folio page, obviously. When you look at your page, you want to split it into a few different sections. For example, a section which talks about the planning of the who. Who is it that you're actually going to survey, or who is it that you're going to interview? And this might include things like notes about brainstorming who you could interview and the why they are relevant. How you identified possible interviewees, how you got in touch with them. So it might be web pages and things that you looked at, found contact details for. It might be discussion or talking about or writing about people that you know, contacts that you have. You need a detailed explanation about why this person or these people or this group, if it's a survey, was the appropriate or the relevant or the potentially useful group that they were. Any difficulties that you have had with this in identifying someone and how you overcame these problems is also really important to put in. Don't shy away from talking about who you've chosen not to interview, and tell me about why you chose the group that you did to survey and why you've chosen not to survey another particular group. It's also really important, and it helps that you can then demonstrate your ability to identify appropriate sources. The next part of what you need to include is some of the planning, and it's the planning of the what this time. So this includes things like your thoughts and reflection upon the types of information you need and how you're going to get it, what types of questions you will need to ask to get the right information. You might have examples of questions that you have decided are good ones, examples of questions that you've decided are inappropriate, and why in this section. You're going to talk about things like where it will fit into or how it will be useful in your outcome. So is there something in particular that you are looking to back up, something that you want to fact check, someone's data that you've found that you're just looking to be able to reinforce that with your own primary research. See if you can identify the gaps in your research and what you're hoping to fill by doing this interview or the survey. Maybe a little bit of a discussion about whether you need qualitative or quantitative data and how you're designing questions to get what you need. Are you looking for tables and graphs, or are you looking for quotes that you can use? Do you need to trial any of the questions? Did you trial any of the questions? What happened when you trialed the questions? Did you have to go back and change any of your questions? All of those kinds of things can go into the planning box on your page. Then you need some kind of evidence of the interview or the survey, and that could be as simple as using screen captures of notes, maybe a photograph of you at your interview, a transcript of what you have recorded, etc. The next component of this is how you're actually going to use this research, so how it goes into your outcome. For example, what quotes you've chosen to use and why, and where does the information fit in with what you already have. What other sources do you have that support, that contradict, or that help to explain, etc., your interview data? And what's the format of the data that you're planning on using? Is it the graphs? Is it the quotes? Is it the tables? You can actually screen capture those and include those on the page, discuss them, analyse them. Tell me about why you chose the formats that you have. Why have you chosen a pie graph in contrast to choosing a bar graph, for example? It can be very difficult to make sure that you choose the most appropriate and the clearest type of format that you can as well. The reflecting upon the process and the capability, this is really important, guys, so I keep pointing out the only place that you talk about your capability is in the folio. You've got to do a good job of it. So in reflecting upon the process, think about things like what you would do differently and why or how, and how was the capability developed through this process. So if your capability was the ethics capability, for example, how did you manage to make sure that your survey or interviews were conducted in an ethical manner? Was there anything that you discovered afterwards you should have done differently or you could have done differently? How did your understanding of what ethics and research is get expanded by this process? All of those kinds of things need to be discussed. What new skills in research did you develop? What new understandings for your research did you develop? Has your survey or interview helped you to answer your question, or do you now have further questions that you need to complete in order to follow it up? So that's a basic rundown on how I would break down a page for a survey or an interview for your folio. A couple of examples of this and what it actually looks like. On the public drive, I've given you examples from previous students, and this is a couple of them. So this is a student who did a survey analysis page. As you can see at the top, they've discussed who their target audience was going to be and why, the aim of the survey, so what they were actually hoping to get out of it, ethical considerations, so the things that needed to be considered before they put their survey out there as far as ethics go, and if that's part of your capability, then that needs to go in there anyway. They've got their survey layout, so here's a screen capture of what their survey actually looks like, and then they've gone into a bit of a breakdown of each of the questions. So what's the purpose behind asking this particular question? And you'll notice down here, for example, this question, what is your favourite anime and why? And why do you enjoy watching anime? The purpose of this one is going to allow them to see whether what is suggested by a particular book or a source that they've come across is true. Alternatively, it could provide me with new information that I've not considered. So that demonstrates that this student has really thought about the purpose behind the survey that they are producing. This is another example of a survey page that a student has set up, and down the side here we have the example of their actual survey and who they were asking. This is the results that they generated from their survey, the graphs that they're going to use in their outcome, and you can see that they've then reflected upon and analysed their responses. So, things like whether or not the statistics back up or contrast or contradict things that they've found elsewhere. The last one I'm going to show you here is a 2-page one, and this is probably one of the best ones I think that I've come across from research. The student has started off with looking at their survey, who they're going to survey and why, talking about some of the difficulties with the fact that they wanted to survey people in Whyalla, and obviously they don't live in Whyalla, so different people that they could contact and how they went about it. Their actual initial questions and why they were looking at this survey, the layout and the plan of the survey, with a good breakdown of what each of the questions purpose behind it was. Even things like just explaining that, having a catchy title is going to help to ensure that residents know what the issue is straight away, and hopefully will draw more people in to answering it. Then they've again spoken about their ethical considerations that they needed to include within their survey. They've spoken about some of the results that they've gathered. They have, after they've collected their results, gone back and had a look at, this question here didn't actually work, and the reason for that was this. That's a really good analysis of the skills that they've developed. Then they've got a couple of examples of the actual results from their survey that they have produced, how it's going to be used within the outcome. So this question and statistic will be used in the part where I discuss the Cuttlefish Interpretive Centre in depth, etc. This question will be very helpful in my final outcome, and once again received the answer I had initially hoped. So that's an example of a couple of really good pages of how to highlight your primary research within your folio. There are more examples and more exemplars on the public drive for you to look at, but I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of the kinds of things that we're looking for. Okay, good luck.